Hey guys, so we are back again for another thought for the day. We're still focusing on prayer. We're still continuing to do that work and look at all of the nuggets and information and things that we can learn about what conversation looks like with God and how to make these conversations powerful and impactful. So, I want to pick up with a nugget about when is a good time to talk. So, one of the things is as a director of operations at a elementary school, it always felt like it was never a good time to talk. And I used to always get the emails from my staff, when's a good time to talk? When's a good time to talk? When's a good time to talk? And I thought about that when I thought about God and how he manages all of our lives and like right, and we always want to know when is a good time to talk. Like it's a real question to ask, when is a good time to talk to God? And so the word tells us in First Thessalonians 5 and 17, pray without ceasing. So basically, that lets us know that it is always a good time to talk to God. He is not like Tanae as a manager, where it's like, nope, talk to me at 3 and at 4. No, there is always a good time to talk to God. God is always looking to have conversation with us. And no matter where we are, what we're doing, what we're facing, God is always interested in having a conversation with us. But in that, it's also good and important to understand that there are shifting moments where there are things that are shifting in our lives or things that are going on in our lives where we should have conversation at those particular times, at those particular moments, because they would lend for better conversation. And one of those key moments is in the morning. And so we know in Mark chapter 1, verse 35, it reads, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went out to a solitary place where he prayed. So I just want to focus on the fact that it says early in the morning, while it was still dark. So in this, Jesus realizes that this is a time where he is not, there's no distractions, there are nothing that's going to keep him, there's nobody that's going to call out for his attention. This is a moment that he can have alone, solitary with God and have a conversation that's intimate and that's specific. And that's something that we need to understand, that morning is a time where we can be really specific, really clear, really poignant to God, and there's no distractions. And I am really clear that everyone is keeping a different time clock at this time, or just in life. So when my morning is, it may not be when your morning is. But it is important to know that before we start on something, right? Because morning is the starting of something. So before we start on something, before we do something, we want to be really clear to start with prayer. Before you start a meeting, before you start breakfast, before you do whatever, pray. Take a moment. Yes, before you start breakfast, pray. So like it's really important to understand that. But it's also to understand that even in the middle of things, so even in the middle of whatever you're going through, take a moment to pray. Acts 3 and 1 says, one day Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 in the afternoon. So it was in the middle of something. They were going from one place to another, but it was the time for prayer. So what part of the middle of your day calls for you to just pause, to just consider, just to think, and to pray, right? And then at midnight. So when they were shifting from one point, from one chapter to the next, from one thing to the next at midnight. So Acts 16 and 25 says, but at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. So there are some shifting moments where you're going from one chapter of your life to the next. There is the actual at midnight. There are these shifting moments from one thing to a next where we should be praying. So when you decided to shift from one job to the next, did you pray? When you shifted from one chapter of life, from one age to another, did you pray? When you shifted from being single to be married, did you pray? When you shifted from being without children to being with children, from having one child to the next, did you pray? So it's important that at all times, no matter what we're facing, no matter what we're going through, that we remember that the word says to pray at all times, and to remember that there are some key moments. So when you're starting something, you should be praying. When you're in the middle of something, going from one part of your journey to the next, when you are going from a new moment, from an old moment to a new moment, we should be praying. We should be praying at all times. But there are also the understanding that sometimes you've got to set a set time just to speak to God, right? Like, there was a set time that my boss would come and speak to me. We would speak every Tuesday at 11 a.m. So what's the set time in your day to pray? And you're like, Tanae, where is that in scripture? So Psalms 5:3 says, my voice you shall hear in the morning. My voice you shall hear in the morning. O Lord, in the morning, I will direct it to you and I will look up to you. So there was a set time that the psalmist decided to pray. The psalmist decided to have conversation with God. So we've got to think about that. Know that no matter what it is, however you choose to form your conversation with God, know that it should be occurring, and it should be occurring daily. You should be choosing a time in your day solely to speak to God, but speak to him throughout the day. Let him know, look, this meal is a little hard for me to cook. Have a conversation with God. He wants to speak to you. His word says to us that we should pray without ceasing. So remember, no matter what time it is always a good time to speak to our God.